Good morning, everybody. We're going to try and start the day with something complex right out of bed. Let's do this. Your brain doesn't know anything. It lives inside your skull in a dark place with no actual input of what is around it. Yet it's responsible for interpreting the world, providing you involuntary action, all the workings of your body that you are not responsible for, to go smoothly, to provide energy to your cells, to keep everything in balance, and manage all your internal signals, and to provide you the voluntary capacity to move your fingers, your toes, to reach and grab, to react to external stimuli, to jump out of the way of a moving vehicle who is about to run you down at a moment's notice. Your voluntary responses, but there's no actual information in your brain to do this because it is in a dark place with no access. So how is your brain getting the information? It's through your senses. Internal and external senses. Touch, taste, sight, smell, hearing. And all the internal signals that are being sent through your body from different organs that you are ideally and largely unaware of. There is a bunch of neurons in your body that communicate with each other and send internal signals of what is happening inside up to your brain. And then your outside senses collect information and send input into your brain. And your brain takes all this information and seeks its memory banks and tries to come up with an answer for what this sensation means. In doing so, it also creates a corresponding emotion, which is why you could have a tummy ache and feel sad. You may feel sadness from an internal stimuli that you don't know is even there, but your body is sending damage signals to your mind, and it's alerting your mind, crisis, 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 and so your brain gives you signals that something is wrong through emotion. So if there's something wrong with your body, you may feel negative, even if you are unaware that there is something wrong with your body. The neurons that provide your brain information from external senses have, like, you can imagine it like wireless. They have big, fat tubes, so they can send a lot of information through very rapidly. They're covered in thick myelin, and the connection is very fat and wide. The neurons from internal signals are very thinly coated, if they're coated at all, and the wires are very narrow. So just like Wi-Fi, the signal is slower and less intense. I need to readjust badly. It has taken, neuroscientists are unsure if it's taken with more importance by your brain in trying to figure out what's going on around it as your external senses provide, because it costs so much metabolic energy to take the external fat wiring and all the information that's providing in, and these internal neurons are barely covered and the wiring is very small, so like it's more like dial-up. But it also allows the internal neurons to communicate back and forth with each other all the way along on its way up to your brain. And neuroscientists also don't know whether this confuses the information your brain is getting or makes it more improved because the neurons in different parts of your body can talk to each other. All of this is essentially probably pretty confusing, but touch a hot stove for the first time, not knowing any better as a child. You feel intense pain. You have no reference point for stoves or for heat or for pain. But the pain in your hand goes to your brain, and your brain says, problem, in the touch sense, don't do that, and you record a memory of that sensory stimuli and that visual stimuli of what you were doing, so that in the future, when you feel a burning pain in your hand or you see a stove, your mind will use these stimuli triggers, these sensory triggers, search its memory catalogs, and then attribute a meaning to what is happening and a corresponding emotion. Avoid that thing. Don't put your hand there. It will hurt. We're unaware of what's going on internally. They say our gut is our second mind because there's so much microbiome that contributes to our behavior, and neurons secondary to our brain. I believe it has the most neurons is in our gut than any other part of our body. But we are unaware of our internal processes. If we were aware of our internal processes, we would be completely overwhelmed with the sensations of everything going on in there. There's a lot going on in there. And we like when you hurt yourself, you hurt your body, and you feel pain. You can't focus your mind anywhere else but in your body. If we were aware of all the sensorial signals that are coming from all of our organs and our blood flow and everything else that's going on in there, we would be too distracted to pay attention and act and react and interact with the world around us. So we're oblivious to the internal signals that are going on inside our body from our involuntary circumstances, unless they are something quite pronounced like a stomach ache. We may become aware when there is overt pain coming from somewhere inside of us. We don't understand it, but we can feel the pain. And then it becomes hard to focus on the outside, and that's why so much more emphasis is put on external circumstances. And the human brain, when it's born, is under construction. It is not a fully formed brain. It is the foundation and is just waiting for input so that it can begin to form neurons through stimulation. It has no information, no reference points, no memories to seek back the catalog of experience to interpret sensory experience. And sensory experience from internal and external is how we form our brain. So the baby's bodily feedback, sensations going on inside, and sensorial experiences outside begin to form the foundation of the baby's mind. Its actual brain is being built after birth. I bring all this up not just because it's terribly interesting, but because of the body-mind feedback loop. there are a few different disorders that can go wrong. A lot of people minimize the body-mind connection. They tend to think that it's not very relevant, or they think of it very abstractly about your physical welfare and how that can affect your mind, and how your mind can affect your physical welfare. Things like how you take care of your health and your general health impacting your body or impacting your mind, and your stress levels and the way you think about things impacting disease processes and problems with your body. As mumbo jumbo, frou-frou kind of out there thought. That's why there is actual practical application for yoga and things to heal the body and heal the mind. But the body-mind connection is critical to know when talking about your general capacity to feel well, and especially in two particular disorders, somatization and conversion. Somatization is typically diagnosed when someone below the age of 35 has numerous medical complaints, medically unexplained symptoms, or a medical diagnosis and their symptoms go well above and beyond what can be explained by their medical diagnosis. So it can be a variety of symptoms, and you can understand this more easily when you think of children. If a child is upset, they get an upset tummy, they might get a headache because they got themselves all worked up emotionally from an external problem, and they don't have the adult coping capacities to process through this sensorial experience that's creating negative emotion, either the sensorial experience of having an illness, an actual medical illness like epilepsy or asthma, or there's a problem in the household, arguing, and they get upset. The brain searches its little memory banks and knows that there's something negative and bad happening, and they can't do anything to react to it. They can't mentally and emotionally process it, the negative feeling and the knowledge that this is a negative situation, but they're powerless to actually do anything about it or to cope with it emotionally. And so it comes out as upset tummies, headaches, other situations that are physical symptoms. Now, the physical symptoms in somatization type disorders are real physical symptoms. They're not feigned, maligned, imagined physical symptoms. Oftentimes the person who has a somatic disorder is oblivious that they have a somatic disorder and completely sure they have a medical disorder. Similar to a panic attack, the mind is receiving stimuli, the brain is receiving stimuli from internal and external circumstances that it does not know how to cope with. And its memory bank from only going blindly. Our brain can only go blind because it is trapped in our dark skull. Only going blindly on the familiar sensations and the familiar emotions, smell, touch, taste, sight, sound, and whatever is happening inside of our body. And when those familiar sensations to something negative are created, it triggers a response, a physical response, because the body says, this is how we respond. We pull our hand off the stove. When this happens, when we feel the burning hand and we see the stove, we pull our hand off. This is what we do. And so the person unaware that they are unaware that they are in psychologic distress and unable to cope, the body is still sensorially interpreting the world for the mind, internally and externally. And it is aware of problem signals. And it sends those signals to the brain. And the brain produces a natural physiologic response, such as you touch the hot stove and you react in pain. You react with upset stomachs. If you have migraines, you may have more severe pain than is typical with your migraines. If you have a physical condition that involves pain, your pain may be exaggerated, felt far beyond what is normal. You can faint and have pseudo seizures. All of these type of things come out in your body. A pseudo seizure is more like a conversion, which is very similar to somatization. Conversion is where your body literally converts that mental overwhelm, emotional overwhelm, translates it into a physical experience, such as weakness in the limbs, fainting, seizures, tremors, symptoms that appear like other diseases, loss of the ability to walk, loss of the ability to see, temporary blindness. And it is very, very real. It is a physical experience that is not just felt to be real. It is physically real. You physically have a seizure, but there's nothing wrong with the connectivity in your brain. You physically faint. There's nothing wrong after a workup with your heart, with your brain. There's nothing that's causing you to faint with your autonomic nervous system. You have paralysis or motor disorder, and there is nothing wrong with you after workup, and yet you're in a wheelchair and you literally cannot walk. It's completely different from malingering or pretending in any kind of way. These physical symptoms are very real. That is the profound power of the body-mind feedback loop. That this constant correspondence between internal and external stimuli and the seeking from the memory banks to what each being blindfolded having your ears covered and just trying to touch things and memorize what a sensation means, having someone rub something random across your skin and guess the object. That's what your brain is trying to do. And so when it recognizes something that is a familiar sensation to difficulty, issue, trauma, problem, pain, terror, etc., and you may be completely oblivious to the trigger. These sort of disorders, that your body, you can only stand so much stress hormone, so much cortisol, so much of this in your body before you start to exhibit physical symptoms, physical releases of like purging of this negative situation. If you've been attacked by a dog and you hear a dog growl, you have a physiologic response because your brain remembers that trigger. And what happened last time you heard a dog growl was you got mauled, and that was painful. And so now your body is reacting. But oftentimes you're unaware of the trigger of said reaction. And conversion episodes can go on and on and on and on. You can be in that state for weeks, months, years, forever. Somatic issues tend to be more diversified, more like the child with the upset stomach, the headaches, the intensification of current medical conditions, just a smattering of vague somatic symptoms. And we all somatize. All of us do. We just don't realize that we're doing it. 12% of all doctor's appointments are based on somatic symptoms. Tension headaches, upset stomachs, diarrhea, constipation, other heart fluttering, twitches and tremors and things that are not due to anything but the corresponding body-mind feedback loop, and it's dumping out of trying to process something that it was triggered into a memory of being bad, and so you're having a natural physiologic response. Typically someone who winds up with somatic issues and conversion disorders is a person who has been traumatized. They have experienced a trauma that was too much for their body, like an extreme car accident, several surgeries, for their body to handle, or for their mind to handle, witnessing a murder, something extreme that was too much for their body to handle, and so they had a conversion disorder. They cannot process it, they cannot cope, and it was very extreme. Somatic conditions start from often childhood trauma, extended, long-term, continued trauma experiences, and they may be vastly different and chaotic, and the individual can't make sense of or cope with or properly address or have had addressed the traumatic things that have occurred over the course of their life. And so from the early ages, they only had the stimulation. Their physiologic responses were responding to the stimuli that was around them, causing them stress. And as they grew and acquired more and more trauma, this trauma was also not dealt with, not processed, and their body became conditioned to be the catalyst is not the right word, but to cope with emotion is through the physiologic response, became conditioned. And so the physiologic response is pronounced and creates somatic symptoms when it is triggered into a similar physiologic internal or external stimuli through the senses to a traumatic previous experience. That could be something as simple as the dark at night, or stress and anxiety, fear, things that were experienced during the traumatic events previously that the child didn't have the connections or the networking or the assistance given to them to properly address these things. They can grow up with a somatic condition. People do recover from somatic conditions and conversion disorders. It takes work, it takes therapy. There's specialized therapies for this. But it is a very real condition. People are not pretending to have medical problems. The dis-ease in them actually produces disease in the body. It actually produces legitimate physiologic and physical symptoms. And it is once it is begun, especially the earlier it is begun, the more hardwired it is that this is how your brain deals with X, Y, and Z. It becomes a part of your neural network because the brain is born unformed, unfinished, and wiring is hardwired that you process things through your body. So the earlier it begins, the harder it is to undo. But it can be undone, but it's a very challenging knot. I'm going to link, actually, I added it to my audiobook section, The Body Keeps Score. It's a very helpful book in this department. But never underestimate how well you treat your body. Never underestimate stress and not dealing with the problems in your life, not coping with the problems in your life. Never minimize someone with somatic symptoms or conversion disorders as less than real physical symptoms, because that's exactly what they are, is real physical symptoms. The cause is different, but the symptom is real. It is profound, deep, and disturbing how much power the mind-body connection has that you can go blind and lose the use of your legs legitimately from psychological difficulty. Have compassion and understanding and take good care of yourself. Because they continually, constantly are reporting back and forth between each other. What's going on in your life, in your body, in your mind, in your environment, and how it should respond. Take care of yourself and work through your trauma. It doesn't always have to be this way. and my editor is broken, so I don't know whether I'll have to upload this in 2 parts. It's pretty long and pretty complex to wrap your head around, but you can do your own research in conversion disorders and somatization and the body-mind feedback loop and neural networks, and check out the Audible book section of my playlist and look for The Body Keeps Score. Good morning, goodbye.